Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Starshow. Bum, 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 bum. Gonna use my Canon to watch for Mars coming back from behind the moon. Let me just show you how far this camera zooms out. So it goes 40x, and then there's digital zoom as well. And while we wait, I'll talk about how I got involved with stargazing in the first place. So many years ago, I had just broken up with a girlfriend. What had happened was she was very upset that I spent a lot of time away from her. I was writing some computer games at the time, and she wasn't happy about that. And so one day I was late getting to her home because I had been caught up writing some computer games. She was upset. We argued, and I stormed out of her home. And I drove out, and I ended up driving about 2 hours away, if you can believe it. And in the countryside, I got to see Jupiter and Saturn, and I really forgot all about the drama with my girlfriend. And so began. It was my third time discovering solo sexuality, rediscovering it. Um, so in my lifetime, I've had 6 solo sexual relationships with myself, if you can believe it. My first one was when I was working on my PhD. I was 23 years old. I had just broken up with a girl who was taking advantage of me, and I discovered that everything I did with her, I could do without. I could go see a movie, go to dinner, and that was that. It was my first time discovering solo sexuality. My second big solo sexual relationship was when I was 26 years old. I had gone to my first Computer Olympiad conference. And also, I had a lot of difficulty at my first job out of my PhD program because a lot of people didn't want to accept me for being solo sexual. If I went home on time because I wanted some space to myself, people had a hard time with that. That was my first taste of discrimination. See, when I was working on my PhD, I heard about all this racial bias, all this gender bias, and I didn't want to believe it. And feeling the discrimination of being solo sexual at my first job really helped me understand what was going on. And and then my third big solo sexual relationship was when I was 28 years old. I'd broken up with my girlfriend. I went stargazing. That's the one I wanted to highlight in this video. And then after that, I call it solo sexual interstellar. I was 28, 29, 30 years old. And then when I was 30 years old, I met somebody I thought I wanted to marry. And then as we were getting closer to planning the marriage, uh, well, something happened that required us to stay 6 feet away from each other. And during that time, I really found myself. And so began my fourth big solo sexual relationship, which I now call solo sexual 6 feet away because I got accepted for who I was by being 6 feet away from everybody else. So I was 32 years old when I had my fourth big solo sexual relationship. And then during the time that we were 6 feet away, I moved to Wallace, Idaho. I took up bowling. I got really good at bowling. My highest score was a 242. And I wanted to get over my anxiety of loud environments because part of the reason 6 feet away was so easy for me was because I hated loud environments. So I took up bowling. I started going out more. And years ago, there's no way I would have taken the job at the current tutoring center where I'm working now because it's so busy, it's loud, it's rowdy, and this is a much bigger one than the ones I worked at over in Seattle. So my fifth solo sexual relationship, which began really in earnest last year when I moved, the first time I moved to Phoenix. I now call solo sexual reemerge because that's when I was reemerging into mainstream society. And then 2 months ago, I started making jewelry out of bismuth, and so began my current solo sexual relationship with myself, which I call solo sexual the bismuth age. And my inspiration for that was one of my students, actually. He's studying about the Stone Age and the Iron Age and the Bronze Age. And as a little bit of a joke, he said, well, the bismuth age began in 2022 AD when this solo sexual guy decided to make bismuth jewelry. And I thought, that really is an age in my life. And so I gave this current solo sexual relationship the nickname of the bismuth age. And so I've had 6 solo sexual relationships, all of them with their own little flavor, right? Let's see. Got 3 more minutes. Two more minutes. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Starshow. Bum 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 bum. Let me see when I first see it. Kind of hard when you don't know which angle it's going to come out of. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Starshow. Bum 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 bum. All right, could be any second now. Bum 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 bum. Oh, I see it. I see it. It's at like the 2 o'clock mark. All right, lots and lots of pictures in succession though. All right, it's completely out now. Wow, that was only a few seconds that it takes Mars to completely come out of the moon. Yay! Wow, my first time viewing an occultation. You don't often have one that's at the same at the right place on Earth to see. I think we should declare every time there's a big space event like this, we should declare it a holiday and have it be just as important as Christmas. Because, and I actually suggested this to Joe Biden as well as Donald Trump a couple of times. And the reason for that is because there's an effect called the overview effect, where when humans see Earth from afar, there's a sense of peace, right? That's why the U.S. and Russia can get along in space, but not here on Earth. That's why, see, Russia is a big producer. They bombed Poland a couple days ago, right? But they're a big producer of something that was invented by the Polish, and in fact, it was named after them, right? Polonium. They don't seem to have a problem calling it polonium. I used to think they must give that thing a completely different name. But nope, they call it polonium because when science is involved, everybody can agree with each other. And so, if we all got to view space events together, I think we would get along with each other a whole lot better. Hey, got some viewers here. Unfortunately, somebody has been hitting the dislike button on all of my videos multiple times sometimes. I have a pandemic of dislikes right now, and I don't know what to do. I might have to quarantine my channel for a longer period of time. I tried to quarantine for 5 days, but I got a lot of withdrawal from doing that. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Starshow. Bum 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 bum. Do people ever ask you what you're doing, like while I'm stargazing? Yeah, sometimes. The occultations are not nearly a high-profile event compared to the lunar eclipses. So yeah, I did get a few people ask me what I was viewing. So I'll probably go on for another 15 minutes to see the moon pull away from Mars. Bum 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 bum. The Peter Starshow. Bum 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 bum. I hope I get to live on Mars. Well, in 21, no, it's 2084. There will be a transit of Earth across the sun from Mars. I do hope to see that one. I'll be 97 years old and hopefully still in the prime of health and be able to go to Mars. And then in 2117, there's a transit of Venus from Earth. I'll definitely go see that one. Here, we can slow down the rate of that now. Let's just do one every 10 seconds now that it's this far. So you're saying we need a time machine? No, we don't. I just want to live to be 2117, I'll be 130 years old, and I'll live stream myself viewing uh, the transit of Venus from Earth. Hopefully, we'll have even better live stream technology by that point, right? Maybe you'll even be there with me in virtual reality. Uh, I think by 2084, travel to Mars will be pretty routine, right? It'll cost about as much as it now takes to travel halfway around Earth, right? Probably, right? Peter Starshow, bum 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 bum. Wow, I never thought I would see one of these. You know what would be really cool is because the occultation happens at different times on different places on Earth. Um, what you could do is, if you got a fast enough jet, you could maybe chase the occultation as it goes from place to place on Earth, and just watch it in slow motion, right? That beeping is me. Oh, that's just the countdown for taking the picture because I just want one every 10 seconds now because it's this far away. Let's see, we can zoom in on the planet itself. Uh, I can't see it with my naked eyes though. Only through the camera can I see that there's actually a dot next to the moon. Beep 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 boop. You know, when I first started doing stargazing, my first thing that I loved to view was Jupiter, and so the sound of beeping got associated with Jupiter in my mind. And so every time somebody would take a picture and it went beep 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 beep, beep, in my mind I would think that was the countdown to go to Jupiter. Now December 13 is breakout of a toxic relationship day. Let's see. Somebody says, should I buy bismuth or fill more long-term gasoline cans with stabilizer in case of some? I wouldn't hoard gas. For one, it's dangerous. For another, um, I mean, why do you need gas? You can't eat it. right? I mean, if the world's going to run out of gas, for one thing, the last thing anybody's going to do is to come to tutoring where I work, right? So I'm not going to worry about losing my job. I've already lost it if there's no gas, right? Uh, Bismuth, it might be used as a barter currency, right? But gas can't be, right? So I would hoard bismuth before I hoard gas for sure. Let's see. He says to Huff, well, the last thing you want in an emergency situation is an addiction. I mean, guess who had the hardest time in March of 2020? Anybody who had any sort of addiction who couldn't get to whatever they were addicted to, right? So obviously, people weren't that addicted to alcohol because at the store nobody was buying Corona beer. The fear of Corona beer was a lot stronger than addiction to alcohol, right? At least over in Seattle. But anybody who had a smoking problem, who had a drug problem, even drug dealers were getting scared of COVID. They were the first ones to suffer, right? So you definitely don't want to be huffing gas if you're worried about emergencies coming. But really, to drive to a safe place, well, go to a safe place now. Nobody deserves to live 10 minutes in an unsafe place, right? Let alone during an emergency, right? All right, we got to zoom out now because Mars is getting further away. Is silver or gold a better store of value? Well, here's the thing. Very little silver and gold ever get consumed, right? They sit around, and the amount of silver and gold per capita is actually rather large, right? For gold, it's about half an ounce. For silver, it's about 3 ounces. So, having said that, if you want to speculate, I wouldn't do it in gold and silver, right? I would buy a little bit of all the technological metals like bismuth, indium, tellurium. Those are my three favorite at the moment because I showed in a previous video how little there is and how little we need, right? So if tellurium went to $10,000 an ounce, this computer that I'm recording this live stream on would probably cost what? $1 more, maybe. That's how little tellurium. But the problem is, it actually does need that tellurium, right? So people will still buy tellurium at 10,000 an ounce, and at the same time, computers will still contain it, and that's why I like it, right? Same thing with indium, bismuth. What else? Some of the rare earth metals, like the ones on the separate rows on the periodic table. Those ones are not that rare, but the cost to refine them out of their ores, right? Because all the metals have similar properties. Uh, I think selenium is the other one, and to the left of iridium, we have a few tungsten, rhenium, hafnium. If I remember correctly, all of those have tiny, tiny, tiny market caps. If you can safely store it, maybe some of the radioactive metals as well, especially thorium and uranium. Uh, I live out of my car half the time. I don't want to be keeping that stuff in there. But if you have a safe area to store them, uh, I wonder if you can put radioactive elements like that in a safe deposit box at a bank. It might cause problems with people who are storing things next to you, though. Have you ever tried mining copper? Have you heard of tungsten kinetic projectile weapons dropped from satellites? Yeah, I've never heard of the tungsten weapons. Well, one thing about just is that the combined mass can drop from a high altitude. Yeah, because when something's in orbit, it has a lot of both kinetic and potential energy, right? So anything that's dropped from that high. One thing I am curious about is I hope, fingers crossed, when they finally discover all the isotopes of some of the heavier elements, I'm really holding out hope that element 115 has a relatively stable isotope because of how much good art I've been making with bismuth. Element 115 is basically, we call it moscovium, by the way. It's basically a heavy version of bismuth. And again, the U.S. don't seem to have a problem with calling the element moscovium, right? We don't give it a different name just because we're at war with Russia. So when science is involved, we all get along just fine, right? That's why I think we need to have a few scientific holidays, right? But I hope there's a stable isotope of moscovium. I can't wait to pour a pyramid or something out of it, right? Even if it's like a half-life of a few million years, right? It might not be safe to touch with your bare hands, but at least you can see it, right? What do you think about the pronunciation of aluminum and aluminium? I actually prefer aluminium because most elements are named inium, right? What is your PhD in? It's in computer science, but I also hope to study nuclear physics at some point, just because of how much I love the discovery of new elements, and I want to go look for element one, a stable isotope of moscovium. I used to think when I first learned chemistry, I was in eighth grade at the time. I used to think that heavy elements were trapped in the center of the Earth. Right, when the Earth formed, it was all liquidy. The stuff that was below on the seventh period got stuck in the center of the Earth, and if we dug far enough, we could find element number 111. And the reason I loved 111 was that it was directly below gold. I had conjured up all sorts of images of what that stuff would look like. I thought it would be an even lighter color of gold and much heavier, obviously, and much more malleable. And I just had conjured up all sorts of images of making a wedding ring out of it. And to my dismay, a few years after that, we did discover element 111. It was radioactive. But now I'm interested in element 115 because of all the bismuth stuff that I've been pouring. Now I wrote a machine learning algorithm to try to predict how stable element 115 would be based on all the other isotopes we already know, right? So we have all this data from elements, well, 1 through 118, not all the isotopes of the bigger ones, though, right? Unfortunately, one piece of data we don't have is that some of the elements we think are stable might be radioactive with really, really long half lives, right? So right now, the heaviest element that we're not sure of is lead 208. It might be radioactive, right, with a huge half life, right? I'd love to be able to put that into my machine learning to see how it changes everything, and it really does. Because if you assume bismuth is stable and then you change it to its actual half life, which is 2 trillion years, it actually changes the model quite a bit. So, which makes me worried that maybe we don't have all the information we need, right? And so I did machine learning on the elements, and I discovered that element 115 with the right isotope, I think the longest lived one was like 2 million some years, but element 116 has an isotope that could have a half-life of 24 million years. And I'm actually not sure which one will make the better crystals, because the elements do get more metallic, right? The line between metal and non-metal is a diagonal curvy line, right? 114 is also pretty stable. I think it was like 40 million years, but that's below lead, and so lead doesn't form all those interesting crystal shapes, right? So anyway, we'll see. All right, getting ready to wrap up because it's not going to fit on the two are not going to be together on my screen anymore. All right. Well, bum. The Peter Starshow. Bum.